Motoko Kusanagi, the main character in Masamune Shirow's Ghost in a Shell, one of the most influential works on cyberpunk tech noir art. Kusanagi is a cyborg. Her body is fully synthetic, save for her brain and ghost. She's capable of moving her ghost into different cyborg bodies. She's free to move into male or female type bodies. She constantly plays with gender and seems to not care about gender norms. Along with this, her sexuality is just as fluid. These aspects of her character have always intrigued me.
I first saw Kusanagi in the Staten Island Mall in a comic store. I didn't even know what Ghost in the Shell was.
They had a mini standee thingy of this image. I always loved this fit. This is a non-binary fit in my humble non-binary opinion.
I remember looking at it and thinking, she looks so cool. She seems so strong and confident. As I got older, I realized I was so attached to that fit because of the layers it represented.
I'm not talking about the sick ass jacket. I'm referring to the masculinity, the femininity, the way her jacket covers her, yet she's wearing a skin-tight bodysuit, subtly expressing herself loudly.
That sentence doesn't make sense, right? That's why I love Kusanagi. She's an odd one. One might say she's a queer one.
I'm fascinated by Motoko Kusanagi's sexuality and gender. I'll get into her sexuality first because it's laid out pretty clearly by the artist. But hold on, I want to talk about her name, Motoko Kusanagi. Motoko can mean different things depending on the kanji used to spell it. Shiro specifically chose the kanji which gives Motoko the meaning plain or undecorated. She's a blank slate that is ever changing. She can move into different bodies and represent herself in multitude of ways. You yourself as the reader can paint yourself onto her quote-unquote plain canvas. Kusanagi is the legendary sword of Japanese mythology used to defeat the 8-headed snake monster Orochi.
Side note, because I'm a huge nerd that obsesses over tiny little things that's unimportant,
I knew about the 3 sacred treasures before I read Ghost in the Shell because I researched the wild stuff the King of Fighters was referencing. The sword is associated with valor. I always think about valor as Link from Zelda, who without question chooses to confront the unknown and takes things as they come. Motoko Kusanagi willingly puts herself out there. Motoko Kusanagi's sexuality. Right, so if you've only seen the original animated movie, even the others that came later, you don't really see her sexual side. It doesn't really come up. Same in the standalone Complex series. Hot take, none of the animations captured her personality correctly. Only the animated segments in the original PlayStation game came close.
In the manga, her sexuality comes up a lot. Most of the time, it's pretty subtle.
She often flirts or cranks up her sexiness when she wants to manipulate someone to get her way. From things like getting paid time off to negotiating with ruthless killers. It's pretty safe to say she's bisexual. She's seen to hit on or flirt with multiple genders, and it's alluded to that she's dated men and women. You see a boyfriend of hers in one chapter, but he's mostly there for plot device. And besides plot device boyfriend, you see her sharing a special hot and steamy time with some of her woman friends. From the character's dialogue, you can assume it's a common thing they do together.
I still can't tell if she actually likes or not.
Is this a shocked at the size reaction? Shocked at seeing it in general? She has a similar reaction later. Besides the many panels of Kusanagi's butt and boobs damn near pressed onto the panel to your eyes,
Shiro can't help himself.
She doesn't really dress for the male gaze. She doesn't really dress for the female gaze either. Not often at least. I really like this show not tell thing that happens in a side story. Kusanagi visits a facility that makes cyborg shells. She's talking with one of the femme-presenting engineers, and there's some flirty body language going on. The hips never lie. She's wearing a tough-looking, badass fit, but on her return visit, she dons a much softer fit, even accessorizes with a bag. Then she leaves with the engineer, and they're on a date. Kusanagi's a smooth operator.
Real quick, this little detail always confused me.
I don't know if it's a mistake or Shiro is truly a genius, but she's seen with the short cut hair, but right after, she has super long hair. So I'm assuming she's a cyborg and she can switch from short to long hair easily. Maybe long hair at the workplace is a hazard. I could be looking way too into this and Shiro was just drawing what he wanted.
To be fair, this entire video is me looking way into something.
I'd argue Kusanagi's 90% lesbian. You don't see her having a legit girlfriend, but it's inferred that she's pretty flaky with relationships. So it checks out that you mostly see her flirting and hitting on people and not being in actual relationships. She's like a woman version of those male Captain Kirk type characters. I like that you don't really see her in relationships, because the story isn't about that. I don't like when artists force a relationship just to show everyone that that character is a gay.
Also, let me be clear, we don't need to see her boyfriend to validate or invalidate her sexuality. You can be with the opposite sex and still be bi. I hate that whack argument. You think that's a thing of the past, but nope. There's people out there that invalidate your bi or panness just because they're partner or partners you're with.
Hell, there's some that get mad if it's the same sex. Like what? Are we supposed to be constantly hoeing it up? What are we doing here? Don't let people use the sex or gender of your partner to police your sexual orientation. Even if Shiro didn't have her sexual orientation in mind, Kusanagi still heavily reads as a queer character, and I related to her well before I fully understood why.
It wasn't only because she wore cool shades, it's because she wanted to rub up on anything that moves.
Kusanagi seems to be more comfy around women. I only come to this conclusion because of the way she talks with her coworkers, who are mostly men. In a way, she kind of code switches. She talks very macho, talks in a straightforward manner, and even her jokes are sarcastic and dry. She's always sarcastic actually, she's very sassy.
She got a lot of sass.
But when she's around women, her jokes and way of talking is a lot softer and layered. She speaks with way more nuance.
Sorry fellas, she thinks you can't handle nuance. Take it out with Shiro, not me.
Although, when she's alone with Batao, she doesn't code switch as much. Which is interesting, because of all the men on her team, he's the one that's most confident with himself and has a softer side to him. I used to do the same type of code switching throughout my childhood when I was around boys, men.
I never really felt right around men. I never really understood how to hang out with them. It was only I got to college and I made a comic book club, and there was mostly men, so I got to hang out with them more and figure it out. The shared interest of comics made it a lot easier to integrate with them. But this is getting into gender talk, so I guess this is a good time to move on to the next part.
Motoko Kusanagi's gender. Right in the beginning of the manga, gender is up front and center. It's stated that Motoko Kusanagi is a woman, in parentheses, a female model cyborg, and goes on to imply that she's possibly multiple women. It could be foreshadowing the ending of this manga and Ghost in the Shell too. Shiro went out of his way to say this ghost isn't necessarily a female. We don't actually know for sure, but she is in a female shell, and does for the most part represent femme.
As a non-binary trans person, this speaks to me on many levels.
Kusanagi can easily be read as trans-coded. She could go in any body and present as whatever she wants in a fairly easy manner. For a lot of trans people, this is the dream.
I'm pretty comfy with my body. I kinda like my body. I have a huge birthmark on my leg, scoliosis deformed my back, which also stunted my growth. My hands and my feet are pretty big for my size. All of that and I still like my body. However,
every now and then, I still get attacked by the dysphoria demon. Having the abilities and freedoms of Kusanagi would be amazing. Oh, by the way, I like how in this drawing, she's wearing a blazer which is associated with masculinity, while showing a little chest and wearing feminine gloves. Throughout the manga, she constantly plays with gender norms. Like I mentioned before, she often code switches from femme to masc ways of socializing. She drinks sake and beer with the boys. She drinks beer a lot actually. She sits in masculine poses. She also Vogue poses like Dr. Ian Malcolm, confident man, or dramatic woman diva. In that same sake scene, she lets the team brain dive in her brain so they can get the case information easily. They're overly curious and get too close to her ghost. She's just too cool. Everyone wants to know about the baddie with the bob. When they say she got a lot of noise in her head, she weaponizes a stereotype and says she's on her period. She's a full shell cyborg. She doesn't get periods. Unless she opted into a shell that has biomechanics which lets you get them. I can't imagine anyone wanting that experience. She calls them insensitive brutes for bumbling around every time they enter her brain.
Let's talk about one of my favorite things, fashion.
I love Kusanagi's fashion choices and the way she plays with gender representation. She plays with gender norms a lot.
Keep in mind this manga came out in the late 80s, early 90s-ish, so the stuff she wears is pretty uncommon. But strangely, some of it is of the time.
While things like large shoulder pads were indeed common. When she's around her boss, Aramaki, she tends to dress formal and subdued. It might be because he's almost like a father figure to her. There's for sure a dynamic where he looks out for her and treats her like a daughter, but they still treat their relationship mostly professional. There's one part where she knows she won't be seen by anyone but Aramaki, and she wears a long skirt. But it's by far the most loud outfit she wears around him. She actually does this a few other times, where she isn't visible by many people, and she'd wear a loud outfit. It's like wearing sexy, intricate lingerie. Nobody sees it, but you feel it and know it's there. When she's around her team and other men, she dresses super butch and militant. Even around Batao, most of the time. When she goes to pay respects to a past one, she wears a masculine long jacket and pants. Yet, it still gives a businesswoman feminine silhouette. I like this 80s, early 90s action hero fit, showing back muscles. A lot of men and women had this fit in that era of movies. Sarah Connor comes to mind.
From a traditional societal gender norms view, Kusanagi exhibits quite a lot of masculine traits.
Again, the way she sits, the way she hangs out with her teammates, she's straightforward, smart, sharp, sarcastic, a bit of a player, a little cocky, but rightfully so. She's even a touch sadistic. You could easily look at those characteristics and apply it to manly man characters like Han Solo or Dutch. She also shows traditional femme gender norms. She's caring for her team. She puts down her icy demeanor when she's behind the scenes and often shows compassion to the victims and even some of the enemies they come across. A man can't show feelings, you wildin'. A woman can't lead an internal affairs highly specialized squad? What do you think this is? Star Trek? I mentioned how she uses her sex appeal to her advantage. She uses her gender the same way.
She's manly when she wants to be rough and stern, but womanly when she wants to communicate or get something.
I love Motoko Kusanagi. Like her name implies, Kusanagi is unadorned. You can see yourself in her, in small or large ways.
I think Shiro went with this name more so for the tie-in with like being a blank slate and being able to move her ghost around. But I wouldn't be surprised if he had all this in mind.
On the other end, he might have never even thought of any of this, and I'm just being a super nerd with ADHD that fixates on things way too hard. Whatever the case, I love Motoko Kusanagi, and I greatly appreciate getting to know this character when I did. It's helped me a lot, probably in ways I'm not even aware of.
Hope you had fun. Like, comment, and subscribe. Do you relate to Kusanagi? If so, in what ways? Do you relate to Batao? To Gusa? Anyways, be careful out there on the World Wide Web.
The internet is vast. See ya!